As you're coming into our space today, please enter in the chat your name, title, school, organization, and the location. Hello. Hi, Sasha.
Oh, Sasha's here? Hi,
Yes.
Sasha. Well, she doesn't need that. Hey, girl. Hey. She's brilliant. She's a former CTO and now I think CAO at Amber Charter Schools in New York City.
Hi, everyone. As you're coming in, please drop in the chat your name and your title, school or organization, and where you're located. We're going to get going in just a few minutes. Hi, Lily. Welcome, welcome. All right, we're going to get going in just a minute or so. While you're entering, please drop your name and your title, the school or organization that you work for, and where you're located. All right, let's get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for attending our session today on seamless transitions, mastering the art of principal transitions without the chaos. As you're coming into our shared space, we'd love to learn a little bit more about you. Please introduce yourself, share your name, your title, your school or organization, and its location. I will get us started with the introductions. I'm Joanna. My pronouns are she, hers, and I'm on the marketing team here at Agility. I'll be your webinar support today, so I'll be supporting with any of the technical information or any tech problems that you might be experiencing, and we'll be supporting Taylor. Before we get going, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We will do our best to answer them along the way, but we will have time at the end for questions, answers, so we will get to your questions by the end of the webinar. We will do a poll. Please select whatever answer is most appropriate for you when it pops up on the screen. And we will be recording this and sending an email out later this week with the recording and all of the documents that we had discussed today. And without further ado, I will hand things over to our host, Taylor, who is a principal here at Agility. And we're really excited about the session today. So thanks so much, Taylor.
Thank you, Joanna. Hi, I'm Taylor Bostock, and I'm thrilled to be leading this session on creating seamless transition plans for transitioning principals. Just a little bit about me. This is my 19th year in education reform. I started as a teacher and later became a school leader. And after that, I was asked, do you want to be the principal of this school? And I said, I'm not good enough for that. I'm not qualified. Let me, though, help you find great people who can be great for that position. And so I got into recruitment about 12 years ago. I was the heading up school leader recruitment at Achievement First, that's AF. I designed all of their selection processes for assistant principals and principals and residents, which was really fun across 3 states. I've also led recruitment at the KIPP Foundation, the sort of national oversight of all 34 and counting KIPP regions. And there I got to coach a ton of great regions and good people. And I also wrote the KIPP recruitment playbook with members of my team. We also established the recruitment community. So we got to train folks on how to do recruitment. And then about 6 years ago, I founded my own business, Bostock Education Consulting, providing exec recruit services to probably more than 20 charter clients across the country, including one who's on this call. Shout out, Sasha. And just for context, I live in Los Angeles and with my husband, who's also an educator. He is a former school leader, now superintendent, and our dog, Bodhi. Okay. Just want to tell you a little bit about who we are. I joined Agility in July. I want to be able to share a couple of things about Agility with you. So we really believe, and the reason I joined Agility is that the right leaders and with the right leaders and talent systems, equity can be achieved. We really believe if you place equity-minded leaders in equity-centered systems, you're going to be able to build a leadership bench that's truly reflective of the communities we serve. And as I mentioned before, that's why I do this job. I believe that school principals are the most important unit of change in a school building. I've seen that time and time again. So being the person who has the opportunity to locate leaders, interview them, and help them find a great home is really an honor and a privilege for me to do at this job. All right. A couple of things about our services. So we offer 3 different service lines. One, we place exceptional leaders. That's what I do with executive search, recruitment campaigns, and then we also provide some transition support for principals. The second thing we do is work on closing wage gaps. And then the third thing we do is redesigning talent systems. We look at talent philosophy development, performance management, redesign, CEO evaluation, and more. So if it's something that is of interest to you, we'll be happy to answer questions at the end or support you in meeting somebody who works in one of those areas. And then just lastly, Agility is an nationally recognized firm serving nonprofits and schools across the country. And we have a particular focus on doing mission-driven work. That's why you'll see some of the schools that we've partnered with on the right-hand side. And I'm pleased to be able to work here and to have this platform to talk to you. Okay, let's get into it. So we want to get a sense of your experience with leadership transitions. Oops. So we'd love for you to rate this statement. I have experience managing leadership transitions. I have experience managing leadership transitions. Okay, it looks like a few people strongly agree. Some agree. Okay, we have neutral. We got one person disagrees. Great. This will be a great opportunity to learn. Perfect. Okay, thank you so much. That gives us a helpful kind of dipstick of who's on the call. Let's get into the session. One thing you should know before we jump in, and Joanna, can I exit this? I think.
I closed out of the poll.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Yep. I think it's still on my screen. Oh, got it. Okay. So one of the things that you should know about me is that I'm a former high school English teacher, like 100 years ago when I was 22 years old out here in Los Angeles in Watts at Locke High School. I'm very, very blessed to be able to teach there. You'll notice though, that I kind of use my teacher style during presentation. So though I go by Taylor Bostock now, you really can think of me for this session as Miss Rifkin. I'm bringing Miss Rifkin back. And so bear with me as I use things like timers, checks for understanding, chat, even cold calling during our session. Okay, our objectives are, let me go back. Sorry, oops. Okay, here's our objectives. And you'll see too, I have a session plan, just like a teacher would bring a great lesson plan to the table. So 2 things we're going to do today. First, we're going to identify components of a great transition plan for principals. The second thing we're going to do is anticipate challenges that might arise during transitions, and we're going to plan for them accordingly, including giving you some time to plan for your school site. Let me start with a story about the best leadership transition I ever saw and kind of what got me excited about doing this work. So rewind to 2012. I worked at Achievement First Bushwick Middle School in Brooklyn. And I'm not tooting my own horn here by saying that it was a great transition. I was an assistant principal at the time, going into my 4th year, not a recruiter yet. So I had no idea how this was done. For context, the school had been given a 3-year conditional renewal when I arrived, and we worked our tails off in the first 3 years to get the school in good standing and removed from the list. If you want to fast forward to 2019, this is a national blue ribbon school, which we're really proud of. So when we were planning that transition, it was nerve-wracking, right? We had parents and students who'd never gone through this before. We wanted it to be flawless, and we wanted to plan accordingly for the first transition ever in the school's history. Sip of water, thank you. Okay, so the transition was nearly perfect. Here's how it happened. Our principal, Amy, shared her resignation with staff in December. And prior to that, she had had ongoing conversations with the network CEOs about transitioning into a new role and out of her principal role. A transition plan was put into place around December, and the team began working on the plan. They would meet weekly, and that team included everyone from the VP of recruitment to CAO and a CAO and others. Then in January, the recruitment team put together a plan to find the next principal for AFBMS, and they put together the interview process. Everything from posting the job to phone screen to finalist interview. Then they sent candidates through their interview process. And then after the interviews, what we did was there's a search committee. They made a recommendation with families, staff, and kids. We asked people to complete a survey to give input. And not everybody can be at the table when we're making decisions about school leadership, but it's important that we get input from our most important stakeholders, arguably parents, families, and students as we go. Then fast forward to March, we announced our new principal, Mike, to our staff at a Friday professional development session. Later, we introduced him to families at a town hall, and he hosted a nice town hall where tons of our parents came to get to know him. And then in April, he began onboarding. So Mike began his what I call listening tour to learn more about the school and its unique history. And he scheduled one-on-one conversations and focus groups with staff across the school so he could start to learn sort of the story of the school and the pain points as well as strengths of the school as well. The result? It was a successful, seamless transition with little to no disruption to the school. This was a miracle. Anyone on the call who's done this before knows it rarely happens this way, right? We know that the circumstances for a principal transition are oftentimes messy. So think of all the things that could have gone wrong here. We could have had, for example, a principal accidentally leaking a transition to team members before the plan is in place, causing staff concern. Teachers could find out about the transition and not know who their future principal is and start to panic, aka look for other jobs and talk about it with other folks in the staff room. Staff start to look for other jobs. And the worst part to me is like students feel the instability of the transition, and parents and families can feel blindsided. And ultimately, people might look for different schools for their children. So having a great principal transition is critical to the work that we do so that we don't encounter these pitfalls. And I'll talk about more pitfalls later in this session. I just want to say our role in these projects is to minimize the impact of change that's going to happen to other people. I just want to name change is inevitable, right? What defines successful organizations is how they prepare for that inevitability. Okay. In this webinar, I am going to show you an example of a strong project plan, and it's called the Principal Transition Plan. This is taken from actual schools that we've met with and used before. Depending on the size of your organization, we can predict that principal transitions might happen every year. Sometimes it's expected and sometimes it's not expected. So let's get into identifying the components of a great principal transition plan. I'm going to turn it to Joanna to get you that document in hand.
So we have a helpful QR code here if you want to scan it and open it on your phone. If not, here is the link to the document. You can click right into it. I've shared this document with all of you via the email that you registered with the Zoom link. So all of you should have access to this. You will not be able to edit this document. So if you want to edit it, you'll have to make a copy of it. And then that version is your own to run with and use.
Great. Okay, so go ahead and take a QR scan of that. And it's also in the chat if you want to click on that. Like she said, we'll give you a version of the document that you can customize or tailor, no pun intended, for your school. Okay. So in just a second, we're going to show you this principal transition plan. And as you're looking at the plan, I want you to be prepared to answer these questions. What do you notice about the timeline? What do you notice about the groups being engaged? What do you notice about the order in which the groups are engaged? And what do you notice about the sequence of activities? So again, we're going to take a look at this document, and I want you to keep these questions in mind. We'll share out after you take a look. So let me get in here and show you what it looks like. So here you can see, this is our principal transition plan. I'll give you silent solo 2 minutes to take a look at this project plan and then be prepared to answer those questions that I just shared. 2 minutes, take a look. I'll put those questions back on the screen. We'll see you in a moment. Go for it. I'm gonna reshare, hold on. Share. And just a note, I've placed the questions on the screen for you in case you want to take a look. Okay, if you can wrap up looking at it in the next 10 and the next 5. Yes, I'm doing a countdown. 4, 3, 2, 1. We would love to hear from you. What makes this plan effective? What's effective about this plan? I'd love for you to type it into the chat now, answering these questions. What do you notice about the timeline, the groups being engaged, the order in which they're engaged, and the sequence of activities? Let's see what's in the chat. All right. Oh. So adding into the chat, what you see here that is effective in terms of planning. Okay, so some things that I'm hoping that you notice are as follows. Oops, I think we've got A few people in the chat. Perfect. Thank you. Danielle says there's multiple methods of communicating: newsletter, email, PD. That's right. We tell people, we tell them, and we tell them again. That way no one can say, I didn't know about this. Thank you, Danielle. That's great. Marie says it starts internally before external activities, considering all important stakeholder groups. That's right. We really want to be mindful of who we're engaging and in what order. And then Ashley shares that the transition planning begins before the resignation. Totally. If you are using a strong timeline, you should be starting to prepare for principal transitions way back in November, which we can talk about in just a second when we get to Q&A. And in-person communication before written email. Absolutely. And Lily points out, yes, you're right. There does have to be a letter of resignation before other actions can happen. Thanks for sharing that as well. Okay, so a lot of people are picking up on the communication, the sequence of activities, who we're telling in what order. That's great. Here's what I'm hoping that you will pull out. So when I think of it, here's what I see in terms of strategic attributes. You see milestones with dates attached. Those are key dates by when we're going to have something completed, and people are really relying on that timeline for communication. You'll notice too that it balances operational and adaptive needs, both like communications to parents, things that might come up throughout the time we're together. It also engages staff, families, and students early and often. As one person noted in the chat, we are letting folks know as early as we can and in that order: staff, families, and students, to ensure that everyone knows what's going on with the transition. As Brene Brown says, clear is kind, and we want to be as clear as possible. You'll notice too that we have clear, aligned, standard communications for people to use. Picture a series of documents that you could just plug in and use over and over again every time you're preparing for a principal transition. It then also has intentional cascading of information, as I mentioned, like who's shared first, second, third. And what I think sometimes we forget is communicating it to the broader network community. So communicating it to all of the people who are in your network and ensuring that they understand that the principal is transitioning, how the process, if there's an interview process, will work, and what needs to happen. Let me just check this chat really fast. Okay, great. There's also technical stuff that I'm hoping that you'll notice too. It has clear phases or categories, and I like to bucket things in categories so that I know kind of what phase we're in. It gives us a high level way of talking about the transition, which I really like. Everything has a clear action step and an owner attached to it. Hopefully you saw that. We also just include links to documents as needed. That way, like everybody can be on the same Google Doc or however you share documents. You can make adjustments in real time and share them out. We encourage you, of course, to include dates and owners. If you can, one owner per action step. As we know, sometimes co-ownership can get lost in the sauce. We also include drop downs for status of the project, like not started, started, and blocked, what have you. We have drop downs for owner and audience. And then we hope it's easy to share with other people at your organization. So those are some of the attributes we wanted to call out of the strong principal transition document. What I really want to share with you, and I think that a lot of you understand this, is that timing, order, and message matter greatly during a principal transition. Okay, I'd love for you to reflect and type into the chat your response to this question. What adjustments would you need to make to the principal transition plan for your own school setting? What adjustments would you need to make for your own school setting? Go ahead and take the next 1 minute to type your responses into the chat and we'll share some out. And I'll have a sip of water. What adjustments would you need to make to the principal transition planning doc for your school setting? Go ahead and type those into the chat. Okay, great. I'm hearing from Danielle how to help principals make decisions sooner so that we can be more proactive and have a structure ready to move. Danielle, during Q&A, be sure to ask me about intent to return, the intent to return process and timeline, to give you a sense of how you might plan for that. And Sasha's right, absolutely. Needs to include town halls for families. I know at the school where Sasha Money works, folks are very, very involved. And so keeping parents in the loop, but also enabling them to meet with the candidates, enabling them to meet with the final selection of your principals, really important. And sort of like you saw us do on this webinar, you can actually share a QR code with families for them to complete a survey about the candidates that they've seen. So if you do a town hall, you can absolutely do that. Okay, of course, other tweaks will need to be made to who is doing each role, but we've tried to give you some guidance on who we think should do each role. You'll need to make changes, of course, to timeline and just overall tailor it to your own school. But we hope to see that you'll be able to use this effectively. And I just want to say, like, this is a general plan designed to address 80% of scenarios, right? And it's not going to cover every detail or specific situation, but having this plan ensures you're prepared for the majority of transitions. Now, it's not a one size fits all solution, right? There's context, there's the unique history of the school that has to be taken into account. There's the feeling of the school community that needs to be taken into account. All of those things play a crucial role. The plan, though, is meant to provide a strong foundation, but again, not a plug and play solution. It's broadly adaptable to most scenarios, allowing you to tailor it as needed. So we hope you'll go forward and use that template as you're preparing for transition planning. Okay, let's move into the next part of the webinar. Oops, sorry. Okay, this is my favorite part, planning for pitfalls. Okay, the second objective, if you saw, was to anticipate challenges that might arise during transitions and plan for them accordingly. We know that pitfalls are going to happen before, during, and after a principal transition. Many pitfalls are predictable. So I want to share, and if they're predictable, we should be able to plan for them in advance. So I'm going to share some of the most common pitfalls I've seen that can happen during a principal transition and what I would do about them if I were in charge of recruitment. Then I'll ask you to share pitfalls that might arise at your school and how you'll plan for those pitfalls as well. And if you have additional ideas as I'm sharing, feel free to put them in the chat. We would love to hear from you. Again, the way I would approach it is not necessarily the way everybody else would approach it. And that's what makes recruitment so fun. All right, so pitfall number one, poor timing. So imagine this, you were under the impression that your principal would remain for the next school year. However, in late April, she informs you that she's decided to pursue a PhD program in another state. Although she had been considering this opportunity for some time, she hadn't disclosed it to you until now. I know that there are several folks on this call who have dealt with or may be dealing with late in the game resignations. It happens. Here's what I would do. First off, I would adjust the timeline and key milestones to meet the new set of plans. So everything that was happening in January is now happening in April, May, and June. Second thing I would do is build a pool quickly. And to do that, I'd actually use candidates from past candidate pools. So I would consider external candidates, people who have interviewed for AP or principal jobs before, including what I would call silver medalists from past searches, folks who were like a runner-up. in past searches. I would go back to them and say, hey, are you interested in, we've got a job open. Are you interested in interviewing for it? We'd love to reconnect with you. Another thing you can do is ask your team for referrals. You'd be surprised at how many people want to share referrals of great people that they know. So if it's germane to your situation, you can absolutely do that. This is unpopular, but I think you should always consider internal candidates. Always consider internal candidates. The devil you know is oftentimes better than the devil you don't. Many people on this call, I'm sure, have seen that play out. There will be people who are interested in the role 9 times out of 10. And it's really important that you communicate with them, that you allow them to be part of the process, and that you share strong feedback for them. If someone's not ready, this is a great professional development opportunity for them to go through the interview process and figure that out. Another thing I would do is remove steps if possible. I call this like fast tracking. If there's anything I could take out, say, if there's a meeting I can remove, if I can squash more one-on-ones, to become focus groups, if I can consolidate the timeline at all, I'm going to do that. A few more things. I've dealt with this before. If your search goes into the summer and this happens, right? Someone resigns in May or June, and now you're searching and scrambling for a principal over the summer, you got to appoint a summer search committee, right? And that can be a combination of people on the network team, people from the school site, but you'll need to rally a group who's willing to do this summer search. And I always have principals do demo lessons when they come in for an interview. And you want real kids in the building, right? But it's summer, so unless you have summer school, that might not happen. So what we used to do was invite kids to come to the demo lesson with pizza. And that always ended up with happy kids who are willing to participate in the process. If there are questions about what happens when there's poor timing, please feel free to type those into the chat. Okay. Here's the second pitfall. And I think this one is what people really fear, but you shouldn't have to. Unhappy staff, right? When staff are told about the transition, folks get frustrated. So imagine this situation. The staff are told about a transition and they feel very frustrated, blindsided. They loved their current principal and they're afraid someone new might be disruptive to the school. I'm actually working on a project where this is the issue. And as such, they want to be involved in every step of the process. Okay, well, first, we know that it's not possible. Oh, great. Marie, let me come back to that question. First, we know that it's not possible to make everyone happy, nor is it possible to ensure that everyone is part of the process. The nature of an interview process is such that you'll have stakeholders involved, families, students, teachers, staff, but not every single person will be able to participate. And so it's really important to do a few things. One, acknowledge the principal's legacy. People want to hear you say, this principal has been fantastic for our school for X, Y, and Z reasons. It's important that they hear from you as a leader, what made this person great, so that they can all kind of rally around that idea. Like, yeah, we really did love that principal, and their legacy will live on, and we're going to help make that happen. The second most important thing with staff is to clarify roles and responsibilities. You can use a decision-making model like RAPID or MOCA. And really what you want to do here is ensure that the staff know how they're going to be involved in the search, and they know that they'll be able to share input in the search. So if you're using a survey, for example, I'm happy to share what that looks like. After staff meet with the principal, you can kind of show them, here's the survey that you're going to complete, and make the decision. Be clear, though, that ultimately the teachers are not the deciders of who is placed in the principal seat. Usually it's a combination of whoever's on the search committee, right? CEO, CAO, CTO, etc. Make that really clear though, because that can get dicey. The next thing is just share regular communication updates and milestones in the search. When you meet with them to clarify roles and responsibilities, to acknowledge the legacy, say, this is when you can expect communication from us, and deliver on that timeline. Lastly, we have a lot of us have this. I can think of a few people in my head. You always have a squeaky wheel, right? There's always someone who is very, very frustrated and vocal about that. And hey, that's their right to be frustrated and vocal. And they are responsible for being a pillar that holds up the school through this transition. And that is really important messaging to share with someone. So what I've done in the past is take the squeakiest wheel, the person with the most opinions, who's most frustrated. I take them offsite for a coffee or for a walk. And I say, tell me about your concerns. Tell me openly. And I listen. You just listen. Even if it's like, oh gosh, I mean, I knew you were going to say that, or it seems small. Just listen. People want to be heard. All the leaders on this call know that people want to be heard. Then I want you to talk about the importance of being a pillar, foundational during transition, and explain what you expect of this person during the process. Joanna, you've been here for 5 years. You are our longest standing social studies teacher. So many staff members are going to be looking to you to see how they should react to the principal transition that's upcoming. I want you to come with a super positive attitude, excited to learn more about the candidates who are here. And I want you to keep in mind, like, this is the future of our school, right? So you need to be a conduit for helping make that change. So imparting that upon staff members, the trickiest ones, you may have to do a couple of coffees offsite. It is really important. We do not ever want to be scared of our staff. We do not want to fail to make a decision that would be great for kids because we're afraid of how staff will react. We have to do what's best for kids in any and all situations. And sometimes that means a few people will leave. Okay, we'll replace them. And the beauty of that is that you can actually have the new principal running interviews and putting new folks in place. Okay. Any thoughts about pitfall number 2, or any notes from the folks who are in the webinar? Okay. Lastly, no one is ready. How many people on this call have sat with network leaders who have interviewed folks and said at the end of the day, no one that we have interviewed is ready for this position. There's no one that we have internally who is ready for this position. That has happened to me several times. There are several things you can do. The first is dispel the myth. It is not true that no one is ready for the role. I really believe with the right will, the skill can be taught. So dispel that myth and be vocal about it. Second thing to do is build a bench. We're always thinking about, as recruiters, building bench depth, or like the number of people who can come through, who could be qualified to be an assistant principal or principal. Continue to build that bench. Look back at that bench to see who could be ready. Sometimes a leader will say, this person is 2 or 3 years off from being ready to be principal. Well, guess what? If the situation calls for it, we need to speed up and get that person ready as soon as possible. And so that might mean creating an action plan to address the incoming principal's weaknesses. Let's say they scored low in your assessments around ELA. And you think that they don't have a ton of ELA knowledge. Talk to your search committee and figure out a way to send them to ELA training. Send them off site for 2 days with the director of ELA for your network so that they can learn the curriculum and get caught up to speed. Again, skill is something we can teach. Will is something we can't, which gets to my last point. Never appoint a reluctant principal. I can't specify this enough. I can't stress it enough. Never appoint a reluctant principal. That's like, think of the times when you had like a teacher that you have to call on to move into a principal seat. They do it reluctantly. They do it for the school. I'm thinking about somebody that I have worked with in the past who's in this position, and she can't wait to get out. When someone is a principal, that's got to be the number one thing and like the only thing they want to be doing in this world. Now, you can convince somebody as much as you can, but at the end of the day, please acknowledge when someone does not want the job or is reluctant that you're going to need to pivot. Okay. One other thought I had around getting creative, like let's say someone's coming in April, have them for 2 3 days a week in May and June, shadow the top performing principal in your network, or at another school and an adjacent school. That is the best way, like through osmosis and observation, is how somebody is going to ramp up their skills really quickly. So again, get creative with all that. Okay, that comes to the end of the webinar, but I do have this question for you. What is one pitfall you can predict will happen at your school, and what will you do about it? Type your answer into the chat, please, in the next minute. What is one pitfall you can predict will happen, and what will you do about it? Can you put your responses into the chat there so we can take a look? Okay, perhaps you want to share the questions during Q&A so we can pause here. And thank you for your time and attention. It's a pleasure to be able to work with this group and anyone who's watching on video. And now we want to offer up some time for questions. So what questions do you have for us? You can type into the chat or raise your hand, and we will invite you to come off of mute and into the Zoom. Okay. Right. A teacher. Okay. Yes. Okay. So Marie's point, which steps would you recommend removing and which shouldn't be shortchanged at all? This will vary, like you don't want to kill sacred cows, right? So this will vary depending upon the school that you are working at or working with. Sometimes like what I try to do is accelerate the process, the interview process of building a pool. So that might mean we're moving people at a much faster pace through video interviews, through phone interviews. Maybe we are truncating or not giving at all the pre-work that we were planning to give, and we're switching it up instead to a scenario or something that people can do on the spot. So I would try, Marie, to remove steps in the interview process if you can. The things that should never be shortchanged are all of the communication, a deep dive into the principal's strengths and areas of weakness. And to me, the town hall pieces, unless this is something you've got to do behind the scenes, I think those are really critical pieces that I would not give up. Hopefully that's helpful, Marie. Okay. Sasha's pitfall, a teacher or parent's number one choice will not be selected. We will hear them out to ensure that they have some time, that they have some shoulder to shoulder time when the principal starts. I love that. You know, I know that how, by the way that Sasha leads, that she'll do those kind of coffee chats, I bet, with parents, families, and teachers to kind of let them air out their grievances. They're concerned that the person that they love wasn't picked, to hear them out, to explain why that person wasn't selected, what you're seeing in the new person, and really just saying, hey, can you get on board with this? Like, we are moving forward. We want to row together. Can you get on board with this? Would be great. Joanna, do you mind reading this next question for me so I can have a sip?
Yeah, of course. So Danielle asked, what advice would you give if you haven't yet launched an intent to return survey and want to ensure that we have a clear picture of principal retention likelihood, and it happens to be January 28th? Background, we've seen a lot of change this year, including many new network and school-based leaders.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question, Danielle. The timing of intent to return is critical. And when we say intent to return, we mean getting people to tell you whether or not they're coming back. There's not necessarily, it depends on your school context, a contract signed, but we do have people complete surveys to let us know whether they're attending. And then if you want to work with me further on this, I actually can help you structure who to talk to first, second, third, when you see how your staff is feeling about the transition. If you haven't yet launched an intent to return, here's what I would do. I would gather your superintendents or C levels. I would tell them, it is urgent that we find out by insert date here. I would give folks 3 weeks max to go and find out if your principals are going to be returning next year. I would then share a sample of what a communication with principals could look like. And I would ghostwrite the email that I'd want the superintendents to share with the principals saying, hey, can we go off site, have a drink, go for a walk, and talk about next year? Those conversations can take place in the office or elsewhere. But I've seen this happen at Achievement First. We were basically like, stop everything. You need to schedule right now all of the conversations with principals that you're going to have. We're going to check in halfway to that February 24th point, those 3 weeks in. We're going to tell you what to do if someone tells you they're unsure, which is a whole other piece that we could talk about at another time. And then you need to come back to the table with a clear and honest answer from that principal of how they want to proceed. Is that helpful, Danielle? That way you're accelerating the intent to return process. You're forcing it to move really, really quickly and by like squeezing the time frame. And that should be fine. And it does happen. And I'll just say this, Danielle, since you're on here, you know, people sign contracts and then they occasionally renege on the contract, right? Sometimes, you know, someone says they're coming back and they're not. My very important advice to you is this: let folks know that as long as they are sticking with the decision that they've given you and they're staying with you through the rest of the school year, you are happy to give a good reference, right? Assuming that they are someone who's been decent or strong. However, if that plan changes, if that person decides to withdraw after telling you that they would be coming back, you need to let them know that they will not be receiving a good reference from you. And it's true, right? People who leave kids in the lurch at the 11th hour are really detrimental to our schools. Now, sometimes I just name, like, my dad got sick, I had to go home. You know, that happened to me. Life happens. And that can be a piece of it. But you have to consider like what you can leverage against folks who are deciding to resign at the last minute. Ooh, the other thing I would do is, you might not like this, but I consider giving people like a signing bonus for like signing on for next year or opting out. Like something that's attached to those two things that could get somebody what I call off the fence, because I don't know is not an acceptable answer for kids. Principal needs to know whether they're returning or not, have the conversations that need to be had, but do not let maybe or I'm not sure be an option. Okay, sounds like people like the bonus ideas. And you know what you want to do, Danielle, is create a culture of transparency around departure. Look, if this isn't the job for you, we understand things change, people need to move on, and this is what we expect of you if you're going to be transitioning out of this role. We know life happens, things can come up that make it really hard to stick with the plan. And here we have a culture of transparency about returning. Where I worked at Achievement First, we were talking to people a year in advance. We were then having first conversations in October to say, how are you feeling? What are you thinking? Not sure yet? Follow-up conversation November 1. Still not sure yet? Got to tell us mid-November so that we can make a decision as to how to proceed. And we really wouldn't let it go longer than that. Now, some people will try to game the system and say like, you know, well, I'm not sure, I just need some more time, etc. What you need to say to that principal is, you are effectively like, I'm putting a, because you cannot make a decision, because you haven't made a decision, we are going to post the role. We're going to post the role. We're going to gather candidates. We're going to start interviewing people. Now, if we meet somebody to whom we want to make an offer, we're going to come back to you and give you what we call the right of first refusal. I just love this because you could build a pool. The principal isn't sure what they want to do. You build a pool. Tons of interviews happen, and they decide whether they want in or not. You come back to that principal and say, "Look, we're planning on giving an offer to John. Do you want this job? Yes or no? This is your moment to decide." And I'd have a contract ready. If you do contracts, I'd have a contract ready for them to sign in that moment as well. I hope that's helpful. Are there any other questions we can answer? You're welcome to come off mute or put them into the chat. Those are great questions. Thank you. Okay. I love when things end a little early, so let me turn it to Joanna for next steps.
Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. We have a quick survey here just to see how you enjoyed today's session. We would love to hear from you. So again, another QR code. We love those here. I will also drop the link in the chat. Here we go. So that will take you right to the survey. And Taylor, if you go to the next slide, we just have all the ways to get in touch with Taylor. I will drop those as well in the chat.
Some people on this call have my phone number. Yeah.
We will send out all this information in the follow-up email, so you will have ways to connect with Taylor, and also have the recording of this session so that you can rewatch any parts. If any questions come up after the fact, we would love to hear from you. Please reach out and let us know. And also, we'd love to just connect and have 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever you'd like to connect and kind of deep dive with Taylor on.
Yeah. And let me say, I'd love to help you with your principal searches. If you have upcoming principal searches or vacancies that you know of, and you feel like you need support on how to run that process, how to find people, etc., reach out to me. We would love to be able to support you in that. And one of the great things that we do, and then I'll be quiet, Joanna, is I can create a plan that enables you to interview both your internal candidates and your external candidates simultaneously, so that you can then really decide who is right suited for the role. So if you're having principal transitions, or if you just want to talk about like a situation that you're not sure what to do with, definitely contact us. I always tell people like 15 minutes is easy, won't kill you, and that's the time that you'll be able to get on my calendar. All right. Anything else?
Thank you so much.
Okay.
We appreciate you being here, and Taylor, we appreciate your expertise in this knowledge. So thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Oh, I'm so glad. Okay, I hope that's helpful. And if this is something that's useful and you'd like to see more materials related to it, more advice, let us know. We're always creating webinar content. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your week. Take care. Bye-bye.